girl, yeah. Boom, boom, ba, ba, boom, boom.
Okay, so realistically, I'm actually 32 weeks today, but it's the first time I'm having a chance to sit down and like have enough time to go over my whole second trimester, do like a recap of everything. So this is gonna be weeks um, 13 through 28 of my pregnancy. Just a recap because my second trimester was wild. And yeah, I mean, I'm still like dealing with things from my second trimester. But in my third trimester, I'm actually able to do weekly updates. I'll be wearing this same shirt for the first 3 week videos because I'm 32 weeks today. But for my third trimester, it's going to be weekly updates. And for my second trimester, it's going to be just one big recap. Okay, so in the beginning of my second trimester, I was really, really hoping I was going to get that little energy boost, that sometimes happens because you're super tired in the first trimester just because there's a lot of baby building going on. But in the beginning of my second trimester, I just got more and more tired as time went on. So, and I think this also has to do with the fact that I am still nursing my youngest right now. So, and that was another thing. Like, I had been told by like doctors and midwives that like, oh, your baby will most likely wean during the second trimester once colostrum comes in. Has not happened. I'm 32 weeks and she will still gladly have mommy's milk. But in the beginning of my second trimester, she was still very, very much dependent on nursing for comfort. So throughout the night, she was waking up maybe like at least twice every night to nurse. She would want it first thing in the morning. And I was able to kind of keep her off of nursing throughout the day as long as I could keep her busy enough. But then it would be the only way she could fall asleep at night. So I was still nursing her at least like 4 times each day, give or take. But I kind of did my best to get her away from nighttime nursing and get her more to be able to self-soothe. So I want to say by 20 weeks, I was able to just nurse her once in the night, if that sometimes. And it really helped a lot with like being able to just have enough energy to make it through the day because being pregnant and nursing at the same time, it's like constantly exhausted, constantly like not able to drink enough. I was doing like protein shakes, and even like taking a prenatal only goes but so far when there's like both things going on at the same time. So I just felt extremely drained. And that was like my main thing between 13 and 20 weeks. Around 16 weeks though, I did start to like feel baby moving and like that was really cool. Just because up until that point, up until you feel like strong movement, it's kind of just like, yeah, I know I'm pregnant, but I want to feel like I'm pregnant. Granted, the tiredness and being drained helped me to feel like I was pregnant, but still, yeah, around like 16 weeks, I definitely was feeling strong movement. And I guess some moms would feel like that's like kind of early, but I was feeling like some sort of movement from around like, I might even say 12 weeks, but this is my third baby. I have like no core muscles, so I have a very thin abdominal wall at this point, so like I could feel every little thing. I want to say like even there was a point in my first trimester where I could see like not the baby moving, but as my body would shift around, I actually once saw like something go like up and move like a little worm. And I'm assuming it was like some sort of organ being pushed out of the way, but it was super weird. And that was in my first trimester. So like, yeah, super thin abdominal wall, been feeling everything for a while. But yeah, and then we actually found a new midwife around 16 weeks. which was really nice because we have clicked so well. We did our anatomy scan a little bit earlier than the 20-week mark. We did it 18 weeks, 6 days. So like around 19 weeks, I had my anatomy scan. So that was super cool. But at my anatomy scan, baby was definitely head up, and I've never experienced that. Like both of my other kids were head down every time from the anatomy scan on. So that like gave me a little bit of heart palpitations. I was like, oh my gosh, not a breech baby. But she was just moving and swimming around a lot and has since stayed head down later on. So no longer anything I'm worried about. But you know, to see her for the first time, like looking like a baby, but being in the foot down position, I was a little alarmed. And you know, it's hard to tell a mom like, oh, don't worry, you got a lot of time, because we know we have a lot of time for the baby to turn, but it doesn't feel like it. And I did do some like inversions, which is like an exercise where you kind of go upside down a little bit. So your elbows are on the ground and then your knees are up on the couch, just to kind of like allow the baby to make sure they're out of the pelvis. And then when you go back up, they'll have that extra space to be able to move around freely. I did that maybe a few times before 25 weeks, and definitely by 25 weeks she was head down. And I know that because I had another scan around 25 weeks, which I will explain soon. So in my second trimester, I had really, really bad tooth pain. And with each of my kids, I've had like the, irritated gums thing, which is like a common symptom. Sometimes your gums will bleed when you brush your teeth while you're pregnant, things like that. But this time around, it was just ridiculous tooth pain. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And it was to the point where like I had to go to the dentist. But when I did go to the dentist, I think I was like 22 weeks the first time I went to the dentist. And I say the first time because since then it has felt like I've been living at the dentist's office as my second home. It's been rough. But around 22 weeks I went, and they checked my mouth out and stuff. And it kind of ended up feeling like all they could see was like, I'm a pregnant woman, so like they're gonna try to avoid doing anything they can, which I understand that, but there's a certain point where like you have to see me as like a person in pain that needs treatment, so I can no longer be in pain. And in this experience, I really felt like they just saw me as a baby carrier and they had to protect the baby. And in this like mindset of like, oh, she's carrying a baby, they inadvertently left the baby in more danger. So I went to the dentist, they checked, and I had like a filling that had come out. In that spot, they just put a temporary filling, so like didn't scrape it out, didn't do anything. They just put like, it's kind of like a putty, like that hardens, and they just put that in, a temporary filling. And then they told me that I had an infection in the back of my wisdom tooth, my top wisdom tooth. Mind you, I told them I was feeling a lot more pain on the bottom, but they told me, oh, it seems like you have an infection in the top. So I'm like, okay. But they literally were like, we're going to try to do the least amount possible to just be able to keep you able to continue, and then you'll come back after you have the baby and we can fix stuff. And I'm like, okay. But they referred me to an oral surgeon to see if it would be worth it to pull that top tooth, but they didn't prescribe me any antibiotics, right? So if you have a tooth infection, it can spread to the baby and endanger the baby and cause like preterm labor and things like that. I was never prescribed any antibiotics. And even if I were to be getting like a tooth pulled from the oral surgeon or something, they would still need me to be on antibiotics at least for like a few days before I can even get the tooth pulled. So it just made no sense that nobody gave me a prescription. But I went to the oral surgeon, they did like a consultation, and they wrote up this letter. Mind you, I already had a letter from my midwife laying out everything that, is acceptable to have done during my pregnancy. And it basically included everything that I would have needed to have done. But the oral surgeon, I could tell, first of all, they were very like hesitant in like the way they were treating me because I had a midwife and I didn't have an OB, and like certain things they did and said came across as like, well, we're gonna send another letter to the midwife, blah blah blah. And they sent this letter to my midwife basically requesting to like put me to sleep and give me Vicodin and this and that. And I had already told them like, well, I don't want to do all that. And the issues that I was having at the time, they told me themselves that those things were not necessary and that can wait until after I have the baby. And the only things that I needed to be done in order to have like the infection gone and to remove like the problem tooth, everything would have been acceptable to do during pregnancy and was already included in my letter my original letter that I had from my midwife. They sent another letter to my midwife instead of treating me. And mind you, because I was nursing, they also sent like a letter to Blossom's pediatrician, and it was like a whole thing where basically like none of my providers were comfortable with the things that were requested by the oral surgeon, and I myself was not comfortable with the things that were requested, because just something as simple as like starting off with a prescription for amoxicillin so my infection can start to like die down. No one attempted to do that, and that was already approved in my original letter. So there was no reason that needed to wait. It was really just like everyone just kept like passing me around and trying to avoid it as long as possible. So that was frustrating because I was in a lot of pain, obviously, and no one was really helping. And at this point, I was like surviving off of extra strength Tylenol. So it was just, I would like to be able to stop taking this medication constantly and have this infection out of my mouth. But that's not what happened. And eventually, about a week later, so when I'm around, no. I almost forgot. So that day that I got the temporary filling done, I had driven to the oral surgeon, tried to get a consultation done that day. They had me make an appointment for the next week, right? So between the temporary filling and the consultation with the oral surgeon was like a week. But the day after I'd gotten the temporary filling done, I had a fall. So I was in the back room at our house. I was in the laundry room area, and I slipped on like a piece of kids' clothing. And Marcus had just gotten home from work, and he literally had just walked in the door. I went to the back, and I was trying to like rush around so that we could go do our evening walk together. And I slipped and immediately just went down, and I hit my head on the concrete of the door frame, because our back room is actually a converted garage. So it has like concrete because it was originally like an outer room. There's a concrete on the bottom of the door frame and then like the metal door frame thing right on top. And I hit my head right here, like boom, right on that area. And boom, I was out for a second. And then Marcus said that he just saw me laying there next to the dryer. And I don't remember being out, obviously. But I just remember like I was slipping and I was down. Like there was no chance to catch myself or anything. By the way, sorry that this is like so scattered. But yes. So that means I was incorrect about when I went to the dentist too. Because I know for a fact This fall happened at 24 and a half weeks. So that means when I went to the dentist and got the temporary filling, I was about 24 and a half weeks, not 22 weeks. Sorry, but I'm as I'm sitting up, like, I just remember saying ER, 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 because I knew I had to go to the emergency room, like, immediately. So Marcus is trying to get me, like, I'm extremely dizzy, cannot barely stand on my feet. Everything is spinning. He's trying to get me into the car. He's trying to get the toddlers together into the car. Hot mess. And he eventually gets us all in the car. He runs back in, gets me some ice for my head, because he's super thoughtful like that. So yeah, I'm icing my head, and we only live like less than 5 minutes from the hospital, which is why we didn't call an ambulance, because we were able to just drive there. When we arrived to the ER, he helped me to the door. And then, like, I went inside, and of course there was a wait, but because I was pregnant, they actually wanted me to go up to labor and delivery before I was seen in emergency room triage, because they wanted to, double check everything with the baby first. So I had to get on the belly monitors and stuff, and they did an ultrasound, and this ultrasound, the baby was head down, which is how I know that she was head down before 25 weeks. Yeah, and the baby was fine. I didn't feel her move between the time that we left the house and when I got to the hospital, but by the time I was, like, in the bed, hooked up to the monitors and stuff, she'd started moving around. But I was still, like, very dizzy, and when I was in the bed, I realized that I was, like, feeling a pain on my hip, and so I was alternating between, like, icing my head and icing my hip. And then in labor and delivery, they couldn't really do anything for my head or hip. So they had to send me back down after they made sure everything was all right with the baby. They sent me back down to emergency room triage, and there was a long wait that night. So it's like hours. And when I finally do get seen, the person that I saw in the emergency room was like, well, we don't really want to do an MRI or anything because you're pregnant. It's a lot of radiation. And I was like, okay. And then they're like, and we don't really want to do an x-ray on your hip or anything because you're pregnant and that's a lot of radiation, which I completely understand. Like, yes, I did not feel like an x-ray on my hip was completely necessary at that point, because that is very close to the baby, like 100%. So, like, no MRIs, no CT scans, no x-rays. We had waited for hours, and basically what they did was they did, like, a walking test with me. So, like, they had me, like, walk between, like, a few steps just to make sure that I was able to walk. And then they gave me instructions for Marcus to monitor me. And he was supposed to, like, check every 2 hours throughout the night, make sure I'm, like, easily wakeable or something. Mind you, at this time, like, Blossom was still waking up throughout the night. And that night specifically, I want to say she probably did wake up, like, every 3 hours maybe. So we just let Blossom do that check on me, like, and yeah, so definitely a concussion for sure. But even still to this day, and I'm now 32 weeks, and this was at 24 and a half weeks. So, like, 8 weeks, basically. If I were to press this area hard, it still hurts. And when I'm stressed, I do this thing where, like, I kind of, like, rub my temples, and I can no longer do that because this area, like, definitely some sort of fracture or something, like, it was at least 2 weeks before I could even touch it like this. But yeah, so that happened around 24 and a half weeks. The day after, I saw the dentist that did nothing for me, except for the temporary filling. And basically, like, I couldn't drive myself anymore. I couldn't really bend over. So, like, if I were to bend over to pick up the kids' toys or anything, like, I would just feel like a bunch of blood is rushing to my head, basically. And yeah, it was just terrible it was a pretty rough at least week and a half until I felt normal again. And yeah, it was rough because for the most part, Marcus was home, like, I think for the rest of that week, and of course like the weekend. But I mean, he had to go back to work the next week, so the following week I'm 25 weeks like recovering from this concussion. And you know, the best thing to recover from a concussion is rest. My kids did not let me rest. And then other than my hip being like super bruised up and it was hard to move, the day after the fall I realized my entire left side of my body was affected. So like it was too painful to like raise up my left arm, and like just the whole left side of my body was extremely sore. And even the bruising and everything was really bad. It was like black and blue bruising all on the left side of my body for about 2 weeks. Then everything was kind of like feeling a little better. But yeah, so from 24 and a half weeks to 26 and a half weeks, I was dealing with that. But in the middle of that, around 25 weeks is when I went to the oral surgeon that sent the crazy letter, and also did not help me at all. Like, didn't give me antibiotics, didn't try to do anything for the infection that was continuing to brew. And the infection was also on the left side of my mouth. So basically, like, the entire left side of my body was just rough. And I got to a point one night where it was just too much pain. And this was around 25 and a half weeks. And I remembered that I'd had a root canal a few years back. And when I had my root canal done, that dentist gave me a large prescription of amoxicillin. And I knew that I could take amoxicillin during pregnancy because I had been prescribed amoxicillin for something else in my previous pregnancy. So I knew that, I mean, that's the antibiotic that I should have been prescribed, that I wasn't prescribed. So I was, one night, it's like 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep because of the pain. And I'm just looking through every bathroom cabinet, every stash of old things from when we moved, to find this amoxicillin. And I found it, and I just started taking it that night with the extra strength Tylenol. And you know, I did some research on, like, you know, how long, you know, it might take for an infection, a tooth infection, to feel better on antibiotics, and like for how long the antibiotics are effective depending on like when they were dispensed and things like that. And you know, when this dentist gave me the prescription, she did give me more than I needed, and she told me that. And she had given me instructions that like didn't require me to finish the whole bottle, because typically when you're prescribed a prescription for antibiotic, you're supposed to complete the bottle. But when she gave me that prescription, she had given me extra on purpose. And that prescription lasted 5 days. So the prescription, I mean, I thought it would have been enough to kind of get the infection gone, but it was a really bad infection. And a few days after I finished the antibiotics, the pain started coming back. So this was around 26 and a half weeks to 27 weeks. The infection started spreading again. And it spread to like the pain was in my ear, in my jaw, my neck. And basically it got to a point one night where the pain was unbearable and I had to go to the hospital. So around 27 weeks, I ended up in the hospital because of this infection. And this time I did not go to the hospital down the street. I went to Winnie Palmer Hospital, which, if you're not from Florida, it's a specialty women's hospital. So it's a full hospital that only does women and babies. So it's where I should have gone the first time, honestly, had it not been like a emergency where I had a fall, I would have taken the time to drive to Winnie Palmer, because we don't live that close to Winnie, but we live close enough that I can go. So like even their emergency room, like they will see you for everything, but they specialize in women and babies. So based on the way this infection was spreading, I was very concerned that it was going to spread to the baby. So I went to Winnie Palmer, and they basically handled everything in like a matter of 3 hours, whereas like they gave me an injection for pain, just like I would be able to go home and sleep that a few hours later, and then they gave me the prescription that I needed for the more antibiotics, to just start taking it right away. And then they gave me a new script that like specified pain medication and everything that I could get from the dentist. And they also gave me some pain meds to go home with. They gave me Tylenol 3, which is like a mixture of Tylenol and codeine, which can knock you out. But it was very much needed those first 2 days after I was out of the hospital. But yes, I am very thankful that I live in a place where we have a hospital like that, because for the most part, when you're pregnant and you go anywhere to see any medical provider that is not an OBGYN or a midwife, they're going to avoid everything. They're going to be like, you're pregnant. I don't know if I can do this and that and this and that. Which granted is very valid, but when you're in a lot of pain and pregnant, it is very detrimental, because sometimes things can be missed that end up affecting the baby because they're afraid of affecting the baby. So yes, I'm very grateful that we have Winnie Palmer in Central Florida, and that I was able to go there and get help. And yes, so after that, I went to a new dentist with the script from the hospital and everything. And at the new dentist, they basically like did a full rundown of everything that could be going on. And they set me an appointment for a tooth extraction of that top tooth. But I also had to go somewhere else for a root canal of the tooth that the other dentist had put the temporary filling in, which that temporary filling had since come out because it was giving so much additional pressure in that area that it was actually adding pain. So the temporary filling had since come out, and I had a root canal scheduled on a tooth down here, an extraction scheduled on a tooth up here, but the appointments conflicted, so I ended up having to cancel the extraction for the tooth up here, and I was going to reschedule it. But once I got the root canal done on the tooth down here, things started to feel a little better. But after I finished the antibiotics and everything, I still did have pain in my jaw. And luckily I was able to get with a dentist when I went for my temporary crown on my root canal, who it was a black woman. She was a dentist who had just had a baby 3 months ago. And when I tell y'all, it was the first time I felt listened to in the dental office my entire pregnancy. She blessed me. And I had a conversation with her, and I had some stuff going on in both wisdom teeth basically, but the one on the bottom was way too difficult to get out while I was pregnant. The one on the top could be removed while I was pregnant, but the one on the top wasn't really bothering me. It was the bottom one. And I was able to actually schedule a little surgery where they removed some gum tissue. And so when I got my root canal and my temporary crown done, and I spoke with this dentist and was able to schedule more things, I started to feel a lot better. Mind you, the pain was still there, but I was able to feel a lot better just in general, knowing that there's someone here who wants me to feel better. And that was all at 28 weeks. So the pain and everything started around 22 weeks. Went to the first dentist around 24 weeks. Fell and got the concussion at 24 and a half weeks. Saw the oral surgeon that did nothing at 25 weeks. Was still dealing with concussion and body pains till about 26 weeks. Saw the hospital around 27 weeks. Got the root canal and my temporary crown at 28 weeks. So yes, that is a recap of my second trimester. And I'm going to go ahead and do my 29-week update right now, right after this video. So the story continues in my 29-week update. But thank you for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, make sure that you like the video, comment down below, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.